Welcome to the Biltmore Church Podcast. Our church exists to glorify God by making disciples of Jesus who reach up, reach in, and reach out. And this podcast is a resource that's hopefully going to help you do just that. We're back for season 3. We're already on episode 4. Doing 2 a week, it goes a little bit faster, right? But we're in week 2 of our new teaching series called Ask Me Anything, where we're exploring some of the biggest and the toughest questions many of us have about following Jesus. And each Sunday of this series, we're going to tackle a question that someone in our church, have submitted over the last several weeks that you wanted us to talk about, you wanted Pastor Bruce to teach about and help answer. And so this podcast, we're actually doing Tuesdays and Thursdays during this series to help answer even more of those questions, because we only get to pick 6, right? You have the fun job of picking the 6, and we're picking an additional several that we can go through here on the podcast. Quick introductions. My name is Christian Cooper. I serve on staff here. I'm here today again with our lead pastor, Bruce Frank, and with Tyler Flores, who is our production director. And as I mentioned on Tuesday, our resident C.S. Lewis expert.
Someone's going to stop me one day and and just hit me with the C.S. Lewis questions I'm not going to know the answer to, and it's going to really hurt me.
I hope I'm there to see it.
Dang.
That's my take there. So we're going to be jumping back in today, answering a question in some ways that's related to the message on Sunday, which was, how can a good God allow suffering? Part of that question for many people is, when do I stop praying for something, right? Especially if you're in pain, you're suffering, you're dealing with something heavy, and you're praying for God to do something amazing in that situation. And for a lot of people, a lot of times, they're praying for a long time. And so the question, this is a very personal question, obviously, but when do we know when we're supposed to stop praying? Or are we supposed to stop praying for something if we're not seeing God work in it?
Is that a start? Are we starting?
Let's start there.
I think there's a lot to go from there. I think that you keep praying until God shows you or tells you to stop.
Yeah.
Now he can show you to stop praying if he's like, that's a dumb prayer. I'm not going to answer a dumb prayer. I'm a good dad. I'm not going to do that. Or he tells you, I'm either going to answer it another way, because God doesn't. I mean, God's going to answer it. Yes, no, or wait is the general thing. He's going to say yes, good timing, right request. No, that's not good. It's just like a good parent. It's like, that's not good for you. Or wait, hey, that is good for you. You're just not ready for it yet. Kind of like a 10-year-old. Can I drive the car? Not yet. It's not no, not ever, but not yet. So the hard part is kind of balancing that with the repeated times where Jesus says, persist in prayer. So then the question is, how long, what does that mean? Even like if you look at the tenses of when he's like, seek and ask and knock, those are in what's called the present tense, which means keep doing it. So it begs the question, when do I stop? So, trying to keep it simple, when God shows you don't pray that anymore. Sometimes he just, he doesn't say yes. What's the Garth Brooks theology? Thank God for unanswered prayer. Mm-hmm. But some of that is we pray prayers that would destroy us if God answered. I mean, we can all look back and say, man, I'm glad God didn't answer that prayer that I prayed. I prayed it intensely. But I think what maybe you're referring to is the prayers we feel like this is in the will of God, whether it be for a marriage to be saved or a prodigal to come home or a ministry to flourish or whatever that is. I would just go back to, if in doubt, keep praying. I mean, how many times have we heard, even like this morning in staff meeting, there were several reflecting on outdoor baptism from Sunday. Several of those we were seeing the answer to prayer, but some of them had been praying. I think I can't remember who said it was like 20 years of praying.
Yeah, amazing.
And so what if you quit? What if you just stopped? I mean, for my own journey, I had people that prayed for my salvation for, at least 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, other athletes, brothers, I didn't know they were praying, but they were praying. I don't know what happened. What if they'd have quit? I mean, I know God's sovereign, but I also know God answers prayers. So how does that whole thing work? And so I think here's kind of pass it over to T-Flow. Here's what the pattern that I've kind of seen that sounds a little bit cheesy, but I know it. I've seen it. I've experienced it, and is we tend to start off, whatever that is, with a lot of hope. Mm-hmm. Whether we do 21 days of prayer, we got hope, we have expectation, we get fired up, we're confident God's going to do this. And sometimes, boom, God answers it, and it does build our faith. If it doesn't happen at a certain amount of time, we get tired, and we start to if you wanted to make a 3-part deal, you would say mope. But if we go from hoping to coping, in other words, all right, I'm going to give God an out because I'm not seeing him answer this prayer. So I'm just going to kind of cope, and maybe I don't pray as often. I think that's what the testimony was this morning. It's like I go from passionately crying out to God to talking to God about it a lot of times, to talking about it once a week, to all of a sudden it's been 2 months and you hadn't asked God for it. So I think the challenge is that's why you go back through it, where Jesus compares, like he talks about the widow being persistent against the unrighteous judge. Not that God's an unrighteous judge; it's actually the flip. If you look at the way he concludes it, he's like, if that kind of terrible judge would answer this widow because of her persistence, what about a great God, a loving Father? Think how much more he would do it. So again, I think the answer would be, and that's where it's good also to have some people praying with you and for you. Because you do get tired. You get tired in the journey. I mean, we've got a couple things I've shared at our church, and I'm like, sometimes you just get tired. Your heart gets hard. The whispers start. God's not going to answer that. I mean, everybody's susceptible to that, and you can go down the rabbit hole too. God's not going to answer that. You almost hear the mocking voice, and that's what, again, going back to Psalms, you see the psalmist dealing with that a lot. Psalm 73 is one that comes to mind all the time. It's just like, my foot almost slipped, meaning talking about his faith. His faith almost went down. He almost slipped away from his faith when he said he saw the prosperity of the wicked and the difficulty of the righteous. And his whole point was like, his bottom line is, I'm sure he prayed for some stuff and it hadn't happened. And his faith began to dive, and that's where you got to have brothers and sisters to kind of link arms with, pray with you. I think about the faith of the 4 guys that lowered the guy down. They brought their friend, and if you look at the text, it actually says that Jesus did what he did because of the faith of his friends, not the guy on the stretcher, because of the faith of his friends. And sometimes you got to have that. You got to have some people that are like. I think I told the story a few weeks ago in church. We were going through, or a couple months ago in church, I was going through a kind of a pretty tough time with a deal in our family. And I walked in one evening, didn't even know it. And my older brother, who's one of my heroes, closest friend, not hero, he's just super close friend. First one that was a believer in our family, very strong walk with the Lord. And he came out, honestly, just to do it. I didn't know he was coming in. So it's kind of weird to walk in and see that. But as we talked out there, I just remember looking back at that as like, you know what, for a few days, he had to believe for me. Wow. Because I was like, this ain't going to work. This is just not, this is not changing. And then he's like, part of it was empathy, but a lot of it was just him believing that listen. And then now I'm getting some strength back into that area and going, because I was starting to cope, still am a little bit, but going back to hoping, which is, I'm using that synonymous with faith.
I think for me, as I've been processing this question, it comes down to this why question. Why pray? Why do we do that? Why do we go to God with our things? Since you mentioned C.S. Lewis, I'll just one little thing and then I'll move past it. In The Magician's Nephew, there's the little boy is the main character. His mother is sick and dying, and he wants to go to Aslan the lion and ask for something, and he doesn't. He's too scared, and he doesn't ask. And he has his friend, a talking horse, and he's like, "Well, why didn't you ask?" Well, shouldn't he already know? And he goes, "He does know. Of course he knows, but he wants you to ask." And so why? And I think one of two things for me has been the journey. At least for me, this is my journey. One, it's like my daughter Charlotte. You already sort of mentioned it. She comes to me and she says, "Dad, I want to live on my own." This is a real conversation. I want to go live on my own. I said, "Why? Why do you want to do that?" "Because you won't let me do what I want."
How old is she?
She's 5. And I said, "Well, that's okay. Why don't we just talk about this?" She said, "Well, I said, what would you do what are these things?" It's like, "I would eat candy all day long." And the truth, she does. She comes to me and she's like, "Dad, give me some candy." We always have some ready at the top of the pantry for like a little prize or something. So she knows there's always candy in the house. So she'll just walk by the pantry and she'll lick her lips and look up towards the top of the pantry. She's like, "Dad, please." And she gets real upset when I say no. And so she's just at the end. She's at the end of her rope with this no candy thing. So "Why won't you just give me the candy?" And I was like, "Charlotte, if I gave you candy every time you asked, you would be sick as a dog all the time. Like, it's not actually healthy for you." And she, of course, can't. She's not processing that. She's 5 years old. She's not processing the fact that the sugar into her system, that explosion of sugar, would actually physically make her ill. she's not there yet mentally. So one side of
Neither am I.
Who among us?
Who among us is? Sorry, go ahead.
So on the one hand, like God has told me no on this thing because I'm not seeing the whole picture, right? So there's that. But then there's the other half of like, okay, but God, really? So we've got some relatives. I mean, just like anybody in this world, my wife's best friend has cancer. Kyle has an uncle who has cancer. And so every night when we lay our girls down, we include our evening prayers. We pray for Rachel, Uncle Arnie, and Aunt Kathy. We pray for them. And we say, God, would you please heal Rachel and Uncle Arnie and Aunt Kathy? But then I tell my girls, as I'm praying, I say, but God, if you choose not to, would you help us to trust you? Mm-hmm. And that right in there, that's what's important, is that in the asking, in the daily asking, we're learning something about God's character. We are leaning in and we're saying, I'm going to open my hands and give this to you every day. And what I've found at the end of these prayer journeys, is that my faith is stronger, not because I saw God do something, but because I felt him close. I felt him leaning in. I felt him listening. And that is a miracle all by itself, that we have a God who listens and he hears and he mourns with us. And as we talked about this past Sunday, he weeps with us. We are made more sanctified by asking God for all of the things that are in our heart, not because he's going to answer all of it with a yes, but because in the asking, we are learning more of him. We are learning to hear his voice and discern his character. So why pray when things aren't? Because the more you pray, the closer you get to the heart of God.
I also think about, too, a thing that's helped unlock me, the Romans 8, the Spirit intercedes for us when we don't know how to pray or what to pray for. And then you pair that with Jesus saying, hey, which one of you, if you ask for a fish, the Father's not going to give you a serpent. Right. He's going to give you what you need. And I think it's pushing those two things together, knowing that even if what I'm asking for is not necessarily the thing that I need, God has the sovereignty and the goodness to take that thing and actually answer it in the way that I would pray it as if I knew what I should be praying for. Yeah. So I don't even have to be that insecure about asking for the wrong thing. As long as it's not idolatrous, I can come in and I can just pray and I can count on him to take that thing and to make it into something, even if it takes a long time, to your point.
Yep. Yeah. And what he does with the promises is what he gives us to hold on until the prayer is answered or answered in a better way than we thought. It's kind of like I used to hear, today we believe, tomorrow we receive. So today I'm going to believe God for this, and then that might take a while, might take 10 minutes. But what he's done is he's given him his promises to hold on to until he answers those.
Well, I know that just from doing 21 days of prayer and having interactions with people, you're hard-pressed to find someone in our church who is not waiting on an answer to prayer. So I think this should be an encouraging little boost for a lot of people to hear and to hold on to and to cling to some of those promises.
For sure.
So hopefully if you're listening, you're encouraged today. That's our goal, to Tyler's point, to just keep praying and to trust God with the rest. We're going to be here on Sunday for week 3. I wanted to see if you wanted to kind of go ahead and unveil what our topic is going to be.
I know the topic, but I'm waiting as I saw it on Sunday. I come up with the content, but you guys come up with the titles.
Yeah.
So I need a good title. But we're going to be in John 8. It's Keller, I think, called it "Is Christianity a Straitjacket?" I got to come up with the title
at least semi-original.
That is not. That's the best one I've heard. I have yet to think up a better one, but it definitely starts hit toward kind of the cultural icon, the cultural idolatry of the autonomy of self. And is freedom doing whatever I want to do, or is freedom doing what I was created to do? And so part of it's one of the famous verses that politicians and preachers use all the time. But it's anyway, John 8. If you want to read ahead.
It's going to be a great Sunday.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
It's going to be good.
We're ready to go. I got to start coming up with names here, but we're ready to go. I want to invite you to join us. Maybe you've been watching online for a while. Man, make plans to join us at a campus. God's doing some amazing things across the 828. Why not join us for that Sunday? We will be online as well if you're watching from somewhere else or listening from somewhere else today. But hopefully this is encouraging. As always, you are loved and sent.